In the summer of 1987, Special Agent Michael Travers was working a high-profile case in Washington, D.C. He had been with the FBI for over 10 years and was known as a sharp, dedicated agent who took his work seriously. He didn't have many close friends, but he earned the respect of those who worked with him. Michael was investigating a mysterious disappearance of two government contractors who were believed to have been working on classified projects. The deeper he dug into their files, the more things stopped making sense. He started noticing patterns that suggested something bigger was going on, something hidden beneath the surface. He told one colleague, Agent Rita Morgan, that he believed he was being followed, but he didn't give many details. Michael was a careful man. He didn't make accusations unless he had proof, and when he talked about feeling watched, it seemed out of character. Then, one Monday morning, Michael failed to show up for work. His boss tried calling, but there was no answer. Rita went to his apartment and knocked for nearly 10 minutes, but no one came to the door. Eventually, local police were sent to perform a wellness check. When they opened the door with a spare key from the landlord, they found the apartment perfectly clean. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle, and nothing missing, except Michael Travers. His clothes were neatly hung in the closet, his toothbrush was still wet, and there was a half-eaten sandwich in the fridge. It looked like he had just stepped out for a moment, but never returned. The FBI launched an internal investigation, but weeks turned into months and there were no leads. The only strange detail came from a neighbor who claimed to see Michael getting into a black van the night before he disappeared. She couldn't remember the license plate, and the van had no visible markings. She thought maybe it was a work vehicle. The FBI chased that lead for months but found nothing. Rumors started to spread around the bureau. Some believed Michael had discovered something he wasn't supposed to and was silenced. Others thought he had staged his disappearance, though no one could explain why he would do such a thing. His bank accounts were untouched, and his phone remained off. Michael Travers had simply vanished. In 1988, a year after he disappeared, the bureau quietly closed the case. There was nothing left to investigate. His family held a small memorial, and his co-workers mourned in silence. Rita never stopped looking, though. She kept all his files and spent hours going over his notes, trying to understand what he had been working on. She visited storage facilities, libraries, and old offices he had used, hoping to find a clue. Everyone told her to let it go, but something inside her kept saying that Michael hadn't just disappeared. He had been taken. And if that was true, then somewhere, someone had to know why. For years passed. By 1991, most people had forgotten about Agent Michael Travers. New cases came and went, and the FBI moved on. But one day in early April, a man named Joel Cartwright walked into a small storage facility just outside of Baltimore, Maryland. He had recently bought a lot of unpaid storage units at auction. It was a simple business for him. He would buy the contents, resell anything valuable, and throw away the rest. But when he opened one particular unit, number 114B, he immediately knew something wasn't right. The air was stale, and the unit had a strange smell that reminded him of chemicals and dust. The inside was covered with thick plastic sheets, like some kind of makeshift room. In the center stood an old black barber's chair, bolted to the concrete floor. Beside it was a steel table holding a pair of handcuffs, a syringe, and an FBI cap. Joel backed away and called the police right away. He didn't touch anything. He had watched enough crime shows to know this was no ordinary storage space. When local authorities arrived, they sealed off the unit and quickly called the FBI after confirming the presence of government property. Within hours, the site was crawling with agents, and the unit was declared a crime scene. It didn't take long for someone to notice the hat on the table had the initials MT sewn into the inside band. An older agent on site immediately recognized it. Michael Travers. The news spread fast through the bureau. Rita Morgan, now a senior agent, was contacted and asked to assist in the investigation. She arrived at the storage facility and stood frozen at the entrance of Unit 114B. The plastic walls, the heavy chair, the medical instruments. It was like something out of a horror movie. But worst of all was the chair itself. Deep claw marks were visible on the armrests, and the straps showed signs of heavy use. It became clear that whoever had been in that chair had been held there against their will, possibly for a long time. Forensics teams moved in, carefully documenting every object. They discovered several used syringes in a locked metal box under the table, some with dried residue still inside. Experts believe the drugs had been used to sedate someone, possibly for weeks or even months. Hair samples were taken from the headrest and matched, without doubt, to Michael Travers. But there was no body, no fingerprints from any suspects, and no video surveillance. The storage unit had been rented under a fake name with cash payments going back to 1987, the very year Michael disappeared. Rita was devastated, but also more determined than ever. This proved he hadn't run away. He had been taken. She started connecting the dots between his last case and this strange discovery. Michael had been looking into government contractors, men who vanished just like he had. Now she had physical proof that something terrible had happened to him. But who had done it? And why hide it in a storage unit no one had visited in 4 years? These were questions no one could answer. Yet, after the discovery in the storage unit, the FBI reopened the Michael Travers case with a new urgency. Rita Morgan was put in charge, and her first step was to go back to the files Michael had been working on in 1987. She focused on the last few names he had highlighted: 2 contractors and a private research company called Argonne Systems. The company had since shut down, but Rita managed to get old employment records and financial statements. What she found disturbed her. Argonne Systems had received several large payments from a hidden government account, labeled only with a code X492. The company had been paid to test behavioral control methods and psychological stability under containment, according to vague internal memos. Michael had been right. There was something secret going on. Rita pushed for clearance to look deeper into files tied to X492, but she was blocked by higher authorities. The files were classified under top-level security, and no one wanted to say why. She realized that the only way forward was to look for people who had once worked at Argonne Systems. Most were impossible to locate. Many had moved overseas or changed their names. But one man, Dr. Leon Hadley, had been a medical consultant for Argonne during the exact time Michael disappeared. He had retired to a quiet cabin in West Virginia. Rita and a team of 2 agents paid him a visit. At first, the old man denied knowing anything. He said he barely remembered the name Michael Travers and hadn't worked on anything unusual. But as the questions continued, his hands began to shake, and he finally asked if they had found the chair. When Rita confirmed that they had found the room, he went pale. He told them he had only been brought in to monitor the health of a subject being kept in isolated conditions. He never saw the man's face, but he knew he was from law enforcement. The subject was drugged heavily, kept awake for long periods, and asked the same questions over and over. Dr. Hadley admitted he felt guilty but was told it was for national security and was paid to stay quiet. Before Rita could get more information, Dr. Hadley suffered what looked like a sudden heart attack. They called for help, but he passed away before reaching the hospital. His notes were seized, and in them were handwritten logs that described strange experiments on memory, mental conditioning, and forced extraction of knowledge. One log even described a subject refusing to give up information about an ongoing investigation. This matched the timeline and profile of Michael Travers. Things took a darker turn when Rita learned that a second storage unit in another state had just been found with similar equipment. This one had no ID clues, but the design was nearly identical: plastic walls, a chair, and drug containers. The FBI began to believe there wasn't just one secret room, but possibly several used for illegal interrogation, hidden in rented storage units across the country. Rita stood at a crossroads. She had enough information to suggest that someone within or connected to the government had kidnapped and tortured her friend. But she still had no idea who ordered it, why Michael was targeted specifically, or whether he was alive or dead. There was a pattern forming, but it was hidden behind layers of secrecy and fear. And as she prepared to go deeper, Rita began to sense she too was being watched, just like Michael had warned all those years ago. The pressure mounted quickly after the second storage unit was found. Rita Morgan began receiving anonymous messages, first in her office inbox, then handwritten notes slipped under her apartment door. They warned her to stop digging, that some secrets were meant to stay buried. But she had come too far to turn back. Every new detail about the storage units, the drugs, the experiments, they all pointed to a covert operation running outside the law. Rita believed Michael had discovered this in 1987 and was silenced before he could expose it. The question now was whether the same people would try to silence her. One of the notes she received gave her a new lead, a facility in the outskirts of New Mexico that had once been owned by Argonne Systems but had since been absorbed by a defense contractor. She managed to pull some strings and secure temporary access under a cover identity. When she arrived, the place looked abandoned from the outside. Dusty fences, no cameras, a broken sign that read, Silver Creek Storage and Transport. But once she got past the first building, she found a hidden tunnel system underneath. The tunnels were cold and silent, lined with metallic doors. Some led to rooms filled with discarded equipment. Plastic curtains, steel tables, syringes, and restraints. One room even had folders containing photos, including one of Michael Travers taken in 1987, looking directly at the camera. His eyes were hollow, and he looked thinner, almost like he had been kept there for months. Rita's hands shook as she flipped through the files. The logs listed coded names for subjects and marked the outcomes: compliant, broken, deceased, and unresolved. Michael's file was marked as transferred, Phase 3. There was no date or location listed, just a signature that had been blacked out. Suddenly, she heard footsteps echo in the tunnel. She grabbed what she could, slipped the file into her coat, and left as quietly as possible. By the time she returned to D.C., she knew she was in real danger. Rita presented her findings to a trusted few within the Bureau, people she knew wouldn't try to shut her down. They began an internal review and opened a classified investigation into off-the-books interrogations and illegal psychological operations tied to Cold War-era programs. But despite their efforts, most of the files disappeared, and many key witnesses vanished or turned up dead from strange accidents. Dr. Hadley's death, once thought to be a heart attack, was now believed to be poison. A year after reopening the case, Rita received one final anonymous package at her doorstep. Inside was a VHS tape with no label. She played it in her old FBI-issued VCR, and what she saw brought tears to her eyes. It showed Michael Travers strapped to the chair, barely conscious, murmuring something again and again. I didn't tell them anything. The tape ended with a blurry frame of someone pulling a hood over his head. There was no sound, no location, no date, but it confirmed what Rita had always believed. He had been tortured, and he had tried to resist. Michael was never found. His official case remains listed as missing, presumed dead, but Rita knows the truth. She made copies of everything and sent them to trusted journalists, hoping someone outside the system could finally expose the truth. The story never made headlines. It was quietly buried, just like Michael. But sometimes, when she walks past old storage units or government buildings with no windows, Rita wonders how many other agents like Michael disappeared, how many were forgotten, and how long those who did would keep hiding in the shadows. The chair in Unit 114B was eventually removed and placed in a secure evidence vault, sealed away from the public. But even now, years later, the question remains: who built these rooms, and what were they truly trying to hide?